Okay, happy to be here. Thank you, Simo, for the introduction. I'm Jaakko Koivula. For my career as an IT consultant, I've always felt like a sheep in wolf's clothing, being from a social science background, but today I'm removing the wolf costume, revealing the tweed jacket underneath, and returning to my original area of interest, sociology. I'll be talking about Pierre Bourdieu and his capital theory in IT, or software development more accurately. I'll start with some baseline claims. Now, this first one I probably don't have to sell that hard in this particular conference. Software is developed by humans in interaction with humans. We have development teams working with customers and users and managers. And for some reason, we haven't really used social sciences to look at this. Social sciences have been a woefully untapped resource in business and IT literature that have instead used psychology or economic sciences, obviously. We have seen some improvement. For example, sociology has been used when looking at inclusion and diversity in workplaces. But if we are looking at normal teams and customers and so on, how they interact, we are somehow ignoring this whole field of study. Funnily, the same is not true if you look at the issue from the other end. You can find multiple citations about social scientists using agile methods to do research. So, inspired by this, I have been using Pierre Bourdieu's theories to look at IT. Sociology, on the other hand, was, I think I forgot to mention that, is the study of how humans interact together. That just to throw that in there. Let's see, I've mentioned the name Bourdieu now a couple of times. So who is this guy and what are these theories? Well, and don't worry, this is just a joke. I'll sum it up for you. Bourdieu was a French sociologist of the highest caliber and also a bit of a dangerous intellectual. He actively looked at the harm that neoliberalism in French politics and globalization in capitalism in general was causing on the least privileged classes. So not a detached scientist, but a bit of an activist. Bourdieu embraced conflict theory, meaning he looked at the world as struggle between social classes. So basically walking in the footsteps of Karl Marx. I'll be focusing on his theories of capital and fields. I won't be making individual references throughout the talk, but out of Bourdieu's works, I'm mostly concentrating on the distinction from 84, forms of capital from 86, and the field of cultural production from 93. We'll start with capital, or capitals, as Bourdieu has it. We are no longer interested just about the means of production, like Marx. But instead, Bourdieu realized that there are other things that are important to people, that can be had and used by people. He separated three main types of capital. There's economic capital, which is simple, money, stocks, factories, and so on. There's social capital, which is things like knowing important people, having networks, or having a Finnish-sounding name and being white in Finland. Then there's cultural capital, that are things like academic degrees, professional certificates, or having prestigious hobbies like knowing opera or playing golf. As an example, we can look at the investor and our former Prime Minister of Finland, Sanna Marin. An investor makes investments and hope they make a profit. They use economic capital to create more economic capital. Now, on the other hand, Sanna Marin doesn't need economic capital to get started, as she has so much cultural capital instead. Tony Blair calls her with a job offer just because of who she is. I'll bring this even closer. Why are we here today? Bourdieu might say that we are trying to create cultural capital by focusing attention on the human side of software development. It's important, we say, and it's also something we know about. So we are trying to create cultural capital, but we have to pay something to do that. We spend time not working for paying customers, instead to learn things that we can write LinkedIn posts to get impressions or to put in our sales decks so we can win more contracts later. We spend economic capital to gain cultural capital to turn into more economic capital later. And for Bourdieu, most things end up as economic capital at the end of the day. And there's some social capital sprinkled on top if you actually talk to people in the lunch breaks and so on. Now that we know what capitals are, why we are here, let's talk about fields. Bourdieu has these things called fields, which basically just means an area of conflict. You can think of a football field. Basically, all the same concepts apply. There are players, different kind of players in different teams, trying to score goals and play ball. There are rules on how you can act on the field, and there are referees making sure that people play according to those rules. As the simplest possible example from everyday life, you're not allowed to rob people for economic capital, and the police will get involved if you try. Now, the difference between Bourdieu's fields and a football field is that you can have multiple fields next to each other, inside each other, on top of each other, alongside each other, but sharing some borders, and also capital and players can move from the fields to another in a different and interesting way. Maybe we should have an example about this also. And this is also the part that I'll finally start talking about software development again. We'll start with a single development team, our team. This already forms a mini field, a situation that has participants, differing amounts of power and leverage. Our designer, Jonathan from Reuterholm, is old money, so they are basically working for fun and know which fork to use in which order, no matter how many they are. Lena has 30 years of experience and is friends with the CEO, and Nico with C graduated 6 months ago, so they know all the technologies that the rest of us haven't even heard of yet. All these translate to different types of capitals and different amounts of capitals, different amounts of power. And here you can already see Bourdieu's Marxist roots and how his thinking is in that way brutal, that we really are looking at situations through the lens of conflict. Now, it might not feel great to think about teamwork as class struggle, so let's continue on and bring in our organization around the team level. Our organization is a bigger field, more important field than the team level. And it might make it counterproductive to struggle too hard inside our team than it is to do well on this organization field. If Lena or Nico gets their idea implemented this time, is less important to us than how we look compared to the other teams in our organization. So we might try to impress the management by showing or measuring high on psychological safety and teamwork. meaning we have lots of cultural and social capital, so we get the more interesting project for the more important client. And talking of class struggle and conflict in general, here's our pointy head boss. Anyways, we'll start and move further out. Even larger field is our customers. We are situated in separate fields. We have our own problems, own things we think about, but we still interact through the use of capital. Capital can move across fields, but it might change along the way. Meaning, for example, Leena's seniority means a lot inside our team, but much less to our customer. Money, on the other hand, is the one capital that can most freely move between fields. That's the whole point of money. The customer uses economic capital to extract labor from us, meaning they pay us to code features. Let's see, do I have next? But right, there's money, but there's also other types of capital. For example, imagine that we are working on a high-stakes public contract. Now we all know that if anything happens with this project, then we will read about it on the Helsinki Sanomat and other IT leaders will make fun of us in LinkedIn posts. The customer can use this situation against us as a pressure, but we might not even realize it, at least we can say it out loud. This Bourdieu calls symbolic capital or symbolic violence. If capital or violence is not recognized or identified as capital or violence, then we can call it symbolic. Example of this would be the common view that an old rich white dude is the most relevant expert for any subject. For example, women's reproductive rights. The fact that we don't always see this as hilarious is an example of symbolic capital in action. They have capital and are using it, but we don't realize that. Instead, we play along and think they deserve to be listened to because they are so rich and important. If you want to look at a concrete example of this, just read any HS Visio. Anyway, let's return back to the subject at hand. We'll bring in the whole of software market. This is the top level field. We are participants on this field also, obviously in a smaller way, but it's still a field that is in constant struggle between big ideas, big schools of thought. Products versus tailor-made software, open source versus proprietary code, agile versus waterfall, human-centered software development versus management by perkele. Let's see. The point is that, no, wait, I had an example of this too. Remember how back in the days, everyone and their dog were making fun of the huge healthcare project Apotti. I know I was. This can be seen as an attempt to move the software development field to a more agile direction. So large public IT projects would no longer get done badly by Tieto, but instead would get done by someone smaller and more agile. The point is that everything is a field, everyone is a player, and all actions are plays to gain more capital or to make the capital you have more valuable. And we'll come back to this part later, this latter argument, but as this probably already was quite a bit of theory, let's start using this for something practical. Okay? We'll start again on the team level. I present to you the theory of capital retrospective, or the capital retro. You can use this to really focus on the strengths and weaknesses a team might have. This is black belt level stuff, but if you have an established team that no longer has like constant technical problems or something, then you can use this to take teamwork on a next level. We ask questions like, what things count as capital in this team? How do we use capital in this team at the moment? And is there something we want and can do about that? The idea is that we obfuscate the possibly very personal and sensitive discussions we might be about to have by the use of these novel concepts. For example, our back-end guy is sort of angry and grumpy and has a bad microphone, so no one can understand what they are saying in the meetings. But they are the back-end guy and actually know our technology, and for some reason the customer's PO seems to love them. This translates to a pool of different capitals. There's negative social capital that actually acts as social capital. They don't get challenged as no one can understand their reply. There's cultural capital for knowing how things work, and again social capital for being liked by the customer. The next part is we discuss if we can do something about this or with this. So we make the back-end guy ask for more budget because the customer likes them, and then use that budget to buy them a better microphone. Organization level, some things you can think here. Agile 2. In Agile 2 there's been a lot written about forms of leaders and different types of leaderships and enabling benign types of leadership. Bourdieu would actually give us tools to do something about this. Using capital theory or theory of capital, we can identify people who have lots of social and cultural capital which might not be reflected in their official position in the organization at all. This is a way to sniff out people that would be needed to be change leaders or to foster psychological safety or like learn the things, the really obscure things that no one else wants. And this ties to incentives also. We all know incentives are hard. You can try to give a cash bonus based on which team codes most features or fixes most bugs, and we all know how well that goes. So instead, we could use fields to change the field around people, help them self-manage in a way we would like them to. When we see organization as fields where official rules are just one layer of those fields and not probably even the most important one, then we can find out what really motivates people, what motivates groups, or how groups actually act and prove that they are motivated by, not by how individuals claim that they are motivated by. Now, if we jump to the top level here, market level, the ways a person can try to play on this field are pretty self-evident. As an agile developer, you make fun of miserable waterfall projects every chance you have. Or you organize a whole conference to talk about the human side of coding. But when you start to look this market as a field and the different players as actors on the field, then everything starts to make more sense. For, as I mentioned earlier, the struggle is not just about making goals, winning contracts, or like getting your offers accepted. It's even more about changing the rules of the field. We can take the #NoEstimates people as an example. They are fighting every day for a field where you wouldn't need to waste time on artisanally crafting estimates all the time. Instead, they keep negotiating if they could just like look at the data they have, run a Monte Carlo simulation and try things out quickly. As the market nowadays still require estimates, they have to keep fighting, but maybe one day the rules will change. And if you want to take a look at a rule change that already has happened, look no further than the original agile movement itself. People writing the agile manifesto weren't trying to like get their offer accepted. They wanted to change the whole field. It's right there in the original text. We are uncovering better ways of developing software. We are trying to change the rules how software can be developed. People doing waterfall projects were left playing football when agile people suddenly started playing horse polo. And for some reason the referees didn't say anything about them bringing horses to the field as the rules had been changed. Okay, short intermission. Let me ask you a question at this point. Does all this that I told you until now make sense? And the answer is no. Well, maybe it's maybe. Let's investigate these answers a bit. Pierre Bourdieu's Capital Theory in IT, Part 2, newest Snakeoil. Now, why am I talking about Snakeoil? Bourdieu is a giant of sociology. His theories have been proven valuable time and time again. They are used even more constantly. But did I actually say something new or really relevant? Talk about interesting things in retrospectives. Incentives are hard. Well, no shit. But maybe that's not the point. If we say something old in a new way that is more valid or accurate, isn't that enough? We wouldn't need to rely on like finance bro anecdotes about incentives if we can use actual social science to look at how things work. There's a bit of a problem with this answer too. Bourdieu was a highly empirical scientist. All his theories are based on actual research, large-scale questionnaires done painstakingly. His most famous studies are about France in the 80s, and he was always very clear that the results only apply to France in the 80s. Now me, on the other hand, I'm pulling all of this out of my butt. There's zero actual backing to any of the ideas I've been presenting here. I've never organized the theory of capital retrospective. It honestly sounds pretty dangerous. So now you can see that the first part of the talk was about me making an effort to make social sciences a viable way to talk about software development. You should use sociology to look at teams and organizations. It's better than using psychology. In this second part of the talk, I'm revealing how artificial and flimsy the first part was. Now, if I was serious about this, I would, well, at least leave out this second part of the talk, but I would collect some more reference materials, cook up some numbers, start selling super serious social science consulting. I would start a hashtag no psychology movement to make room for myself and social sciences on the consulting market. It's been done before. There are case studies done on a bunch of companies in the US in the 80s that might or might not have been excellent. It's been said that this book is still as relevant as it was the day it was published, and I guess it sort of depends if that's a good thing or not. Or there are whole books that are basically just like funny anecdotes that sort of make a lot of sense, looking at Weinberg and his books on consulting, for example. But the easiest target for this kind of criticism, I think, is NPS, the Net Promoter Score. It's used so like widely. Simo and Matthias will probably send us an email to ask how likely it is that we recommend all the humanity conference to our friends and families after this event. And yet there's basically no academic backing to it at all. I looked a bunch of meta-studies, and based on what I've seen so far, it looks like NPS could be useful in some really limited set of circumstances when looking at brand health, but that's basically it. And that's one takeaway from all of this. The beware of snake oil and snake oil peddlers takeaway. And yet it's fine. Like, I've been inspired a lot by Weinberg's books. Daniel Pink is another author whose theoretical foundation has been questioned, how much cherry picking there's going on, how solid the foundation is, but reading his books at least made me tolerate doing sales at least a bit. Or remember the original Hawthorne study, where they messed around with the lights of the factory floor, and the assumption was that if you provided better lighting, then people would work more efficiently. What they found out was that basically any change in environment increased the workers' efficiency, even when they turned the lights back low, that it was hard to see, so it should have been harder to work. So, if we provide Scrum Masters and managers this idea of theory of capital or fields, maybe they get excited, shake loose some cobwebs, get some new ideas. The fact that we don't actually know if Hawthorne effect exists or how it works, if it does, feels somehow pretty appropriate at this point. Still, I have some takeaways that I'll actually want to leave you with. Firstly, it feels obvious that social sciences have things to give to the software market. It's criminal that they haven't been used that much before, and it might have something to do with sociologists being mainly leftist anti-capitalists. I don't know. Secondly, finding out if the first takeaway is actually true would require actual research. Unfortunately, it's not enough if a thing feels obvious. But thirdly, and happily, the second takeaway might not actually matter, at least not on the micro level. You can and absolutely should use and mine your experience for ideas and new things to try. We'll have a talk about it in the afternoon. This is just an extension or an example of that. Read a book, find out, or how does the saying go? And talking about reading books, I found out this week, while traveling here, that there actually is an actual book written about this, released last year. Pierre Bourdieu in Studies of Organization and Management, Societal Change and Transforming Fields. Now, it would have been funny or nice to know about this book a bit earlier. I could have maybe read it, and maybe this talk would have been a bit different. But it's still great that these ideas are being developed for real, and also reassuring that you can find some pretty similar ideas. For example, take a look at one of the articles in the book. The Human Bottom Line, Bourdieu's field theory on the growing prominence of healthiness in Nordic work organizations. So using fields to look at incentives. Sounds familiar. As a last, final takeaway, and just in case, at this point, let's not hire an astoundingly expensive consultant to do a company-wide Bourdieu transformation project for your whole corporation, even if they have a tweed jacket. As with all things, you should enjoy Snakeoil in moderation. Thank you.